there everybody, it's Mike DiLisio, and today I'm going to be reviewing Depot from designer Yusuke Sawaguchi and publisher Fudakoma Games. Depot is a game where you are sorting packages at a legally distinct online retailer. And essentially this is what's called a card shedding game, which means you're trying to get rid of all the cards in your hand. There's a lot of those out there. This was just released at the most recent Tokyo Game Market, which I attended and picked up there. It had a lot of pre-convention buzz and a lot of post-convention buzz as well. The reason why I felt it was important to try to get this review up now is that it has been recently announced that the Korean publisher Plate Games has picked up this title, and it's going to be much more widely available even outside of Asia. So while right now it's tricky to get a hold of, not too much later you should have a better chance of getting a hold of this if you're interested. So let's find out how it plays first so you can find out whether you're interested. Depot is made up of a deck of 80 cards with values that go from 1 to 8. There are more 1s than any other value in the deck, and there are fewer 8s than any other value in the deck. There are 13 1s, and then you will go 1 less for each number, so there are 12 2s, 11 3s, etc., all the way down to just 7 of the value 8 cards. Depot is a card shedding game, which means that every player is trying to get rid of all the cards in their hand. The first player that is able to do that is going to win the game. Depending upon the number of players, each player is going to be dealt a certain number of cards. So let's say that this is a 4-player game. It plays from 3 to 5. Let's say this is a 4-player game. Every player is going to get dealt 9 cards. The remaining cards are going to be in the center area for a deck. And then what you're going to do is you're going to create a storage area. In a 4-player game, you're going to start with 4 cards in the storage at the beginning of the game. So you simply flip over cards, and you're going to be placing them in ascending order. 2, 4. If you ever get 2 of the same number, then you're just going to stack them in a column. All right, so we've got 1, 2, and 2 4s. That's going to be our starting storage in this 4-player game. And then one player randomly will be chosen to go first, and they're going to do one of 2 things on their turn. They're either going to play a card or they're going to pass. However, the first player always has to play a card. Now, when a player is playing a card, they're going to have some limitations that they are going to have to consider when they're deciding which card or how many cards they're going to play, and that's going to be based upon what's happening in the storage at that given time. This is a game where you can play single cards, pairs, triples, quadruples of cards, or consecutive runs, depending upon what's happening in the storage. So you can always play a single number. That's never going to be a problem because there'll always be single numbers in the storage. But if you look here, you see 2 consecutive numbers, 1 and 2. That means that you can play consecutive numbers when you play cards. We also see a pair of 4s, which means that you can play a pair of cards. They do not have to be 4s, and the consecutive numbers you play don't have to be 1 or 2. These are just establishing the kinds of cards that you can play on your turn. So let's assume this is the first player. They're going to go ahead and take a look at their hand, and they're going to decide what they're going to play. They've got a couple of different options here, actually a number of different options. They know that they can play pairs, and so if you look at their hand, they've got a pair of 5s here, they've got a pair of 2s. They can also play a run of up to 2 cards because there's a run of 2 cards there. So let's say, for example, they could also play a single card of any one that they like. Let's say that they decide that they're going to play a pair of 2s, okay? So they play out those 2 cards, and now it's going to go to the next player. The next player, to play a card or cards, they have to be able to play something that is higher than the player that had played something previously. And so in this case, they have to play at least 2 cards because the first player played 2 cards. If they're going to be playing either a pair or a run, the total value has to be higher than the total value of the 2 cards played before. So the total value of these 2 cards is 4. So this player will look at their hand and they'll decide whether they want to play cards or pass. You don't have to play cards unless you're the very first player of the game. You can always pass if you want to. But let's say this player decides they don't want to pass. Now, I want to point out one thing. You see that they have 3 1s here. The issue is that they could not play all 3 of these 1s because in the storage, the maximum of the same value you have is 2. They also couldn't play this pair of ones because the total value of that would be 2, which is less than 4 here. They could play a couple of 6s if they wanted to. That would be 12, which is certainly more than 4. They can play 5, 6 if they want to. They could play 3, 4. Maybe that's what they do. They go ahead and they play 3, 4. This is 7, that's more than 4. These go ahead and get discarded, and then the next player is going to go. You're going to continue to do this. Maybe someone decides that they want to pass. So let's say even though this player could likely play something that's higher, sure, they can play the 4, 5, they can play the 5, 6. But let's say that they want to set up for a bigger turn later on, and they decide that they're going to pass. When you pass, what you do is you look at the storage and you pick one value and you take all the cards of that value. So there are 3 values in the storage, 1, 2, and 4. If they chose 4, they would take all of those cards. So let's say they did that. They chose 4, they take the 2 4s, they add them to their hand. Now they have the option, they can add 1 card back to the storage if they so choose. But they could not choose the same value they took, so they drew 4s, couldn't take 4s. Let's say they go ahead and they play this 2 here. All right, you can only ever play 1 card from your hand and you don't have to. Once that happens, you refill back to the storage maximum, which in this case is 4. So we take 1 more card from the deck and we place it there. All right, and that's going to continue to happen until all but 1 player passes. Once all but 1 player passes, you're going to clear out the cards that had been played and you are going to refill the storage with 1 more card than was there before. So in this first round, it was 4 cards. Now we would add a 5th card to the storage, and every time you would have a new round, you're adding 1 more card, which is going to mean more of the types of cards you can play, the more number of cards you can play. That's the basic ideas. They're a little bit more nuance on, how you play the cards, but that's generally the notion behind Depot. Let's head back and I will let you know what I think. All right, so there you have Depot, a card shedding game. You're trying to get rid of all the cards in your hand. The first player to do so wins. I mentioned at the end of the overview there are a couple of little subtleties. One of them is the idea that more cards played is always going to supersede the value. So if I played a single card of an 8 and someone was able to play a run of 2 cards, they could play a 1 and a 2. Because even though their value is only 3, they're playing 2 cards to the other player's 1 card. So little nuances like that, but you get the general idea of the game. So, as I mentioned, there are a lot of card shedding games out there, and it seems like it is a genre that's getting almost as popular as trick-taking here in the last few years, because I think it's something that's easy for players to generally understand, this notion of, I've got a hand of cards, everyone has the same number of cards that they start with, and you want to be the first one to get rid of all those cards, to empty your hand of cards completely. It's a simple concept to understand. The way Depot adds some little twist to that is really through this idea of the storage, because in many card shedding games, you have particular melds that you can play. And this is the same general idea where you can play a single card, you can play pairs, maybe you can play triples or quadruples, runs. None of that is necessarily new. What I think sets Depot apart is this kind of fluctuating storage area that's going to change sometimes in the middle of the round what type of cards, the number of cards that you can play. And I do think that's a pretty cool twist. Usually that's a pretty set thing where, you're always trying to go higher than the next, or than the player that played last. That's still the same here, but you're not restricted in the same way that you are here in Depot. And I think that adds some nuance to the game that makes it a little bit thinkier than maybe just the entry-level shedding game. Certainly something like Uno, which is really a shedding game as well, but is on maybe the simplest end of the spectrum. This is not on the far other end of the spectrum, but it's somewhere, I think, in between, where it's not adding so many esoteric side case rules, thankfully, that it becomes really hard to understand, but it's also not one of those things where you're almost the hand plays itself. You do have to make some interesting decisions. A lot of times it's based on timing, kind of seeing where other players are at, what they're likely to be able to play, understanding the distribution of the cards, how you've got far more ones in the deck than you do eights, and kind of how that might inform your decisions. I think that the game really does give you some nice, compelling choices to make. I like how every round the storage increases by a card. So at the beginning of the game, you're pretty tightly limited on how many cards you can play, whether you can play runs or strictly singles, doubles, things along those lines. Every time you add a card to that storage, it opens up the possibilities of the things you can play and allows you to make more dramatic plays, so that maybe if you're sitting on 3 of a kind or 4 of a kind and they're the last cards in your hand, you can go out with this kind of dramatic flourish, and that always feels satisfying in a shedding game. Now, while it says the game plays over multiple rounds, it even says in the rule book it could end after 1 round. Just things would have to work out very well. And I don't think that I've seen it. I've not. I've never played a game where the game ended in 1 round, but theoretically possible. What I'm getting at is that this is a pretty quick game. It's a one that you could play multiple times. In the rule book, they actually mention, hey, if you want a longer game, you can play 3 games consecutively, and they have a little bit of a scoring element where you want to have the lowest score after 3 games, and that works perfectly fine too. But also, I just like it as just kind of a relatively quick, just thinky enough so that it doesn't feel like the hand is playing itself, but not so complicated that you're stuck in analysis paralysis by any means. And so while sure, it'd be fine to play it as 3, I like playing it in one-offs, and if I want to play another one after that, sure, we'll just play another one and do it that way. But your mileage may vary depending upon what type of experience that you want. What's nice is that Depot gives you the option to do either way. You can play as more of a lighter, breezier type of a game, or one that's lasting a little bit longer, and maybe you've got some of the luck that can be inherent in these types of games may get more mitigated over 3 consecutive games. As far as the production of the game, I think it's really solid. I love the theme in these games generally don't mean much of anything, and the same is true in Depot. They're packages, right? But they don't really have any thematic connection between what you're doing and what the cards are showing, but I love the look of the game. I just love this idea of sorting packages and how the cards look like packages. That to me, for one reason or another, is very satisfying. Your mileage may vary. You might find this very pedestrian and boring. I don't. I love this. I mentioned that the Korean publisher Plate Games is going to be bringing this to a wider market, and from what I can tell, they're not really changing the theme or the art of the game as well. So whether you were to get a later edition of the game or got a hold of this first edition from Japan, I think you're going to have consistency there. The card quality here is very good. You could sleeve them, but I haven't. I don't think that I find it necessary to sleeve because the card quality is quite good. So there you have it, a card shedding game that's kind of in the middle, I would say, of the complexity continuum when it comes to shedding games. A nice quality production, a theme that I like, even though it's relatively themeless, I still like it. So Depot gets a 7.5 for me, an easily recommendable game. I think it would even go higher if there weren't so many of these games out right now. And so to really kind of wow me as a card shedding game or a trick taking game for that matter, you've got to do something that is truly revolutionary. And I don't think there's anything truly revolutionary in Depot, but what they have is quite good, very satisfying, and something that I easily recommend if you want another card shedding game to add to your collection. All right, well, that's going to do it for me. This is Mike DiLisio, and I'll see you on the next one.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you like this review or whatever you just watched, wasn't it amazing? Check out our channel, Dice Tower. We have all kinds of things. We review games, we do top 10s, we play games live. It's all about board games, but especially the people who play them. Check out Dice Tower YouTube channel.